So hey anime fans, the series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with Star Wars Girl? So let's start the series. It is a period of nationwide conflict in the cosmic system. The ruler has the universe caught in his clenched hand, and the dissident coalition is battling the cosmic domain all through all sides of the world. Naruto Uzumaki, a dealer and co-skipper of the XS series tanker, the Starhawk, has been recruited into the developing insubordination. He and his team of runners work to convey the radical partnership supplies and troops under the domain's nose. Their most recent mission drives them to Kamino, the previous favorable places of the clone armed force, presently a realm station zeroed in on manufacturing inquisitors and cleanse officers. There, a dissident supporter has spilled data of power-delicate youngsters held profound inside the Sea Planet's labs. As of now, the kids' lives are in question, bound to become hereditary transformations subjugated to the sovereign's will. Little does the group has at least some idea that peril lies outside the planet too. If they need to get securely with their new charges, they should confront the greatest danger the system brings to the table, the hand of the head himself. Darth Vader is here. The metal ground surface under his feet shivered as the boat left hyperspeed, easing back to sublight speed as it moved toward the planet's royal designated spot. Naruto frowned as he watched out the viewport. Monster behemoth starships drifted over the generally lovely whirling blue ball, their terrible grayness damaging the view. He shook his head with a murmur. They'd need to get through the designated spot before they even had an opportunity to get their genuine freight. Whatever was right now in their freight narrows was simply mess to sell their cover. Fortunately enough for them, it appeared to be that there were a lot of other freight ships drifting around the designated spot, so they'd have to a lesser extent a possibility being seen as awkward. Sake Sanish, his skipper, regardless of whether he energetically contended against the boat being hers, sat in the pilot's seat close to him. Her blue eyes prepared themselves on the types of the Star Destroyers. There's significantly a larger number of boats than what ought to ordinarily be here. Naruto's look left the Togruta. Venturing out back to the planet outside, he looked and counted the many Star Destroyers he could see. She was right, obviously. However, there wasn't a thing they could do about it. Rather than bringing that up, he shrugged, fixing a wicked smile onto his face. All things considered, the planet has a huge majestic base here. It's undeniable there would be a larger number of boats than the planets we generally visit, plus, just like they'd realize the reason why we're here, we'll have no issue getting in. It's not the getting in that concerns me. She left the ramifications open, and he murmured in understanding. They would confront damnation attempting to leave the planet in the event that anything turned out badly. We've confronted more regrettable chances previously. The words did practically nothing to comfort them, on the grounds that both knew reality. The chances had just been more regrettable by a couple of starships, plus or minus, and those chances included having their foe know about them. In the event that the realm learned of their actual mission, this would rapidly go down in their team's log books as the most obviously awful mission ever. In any case, on the off chance that everybody lived, it would take a marvel for everybody to get by, considering Naruto's capacity to beat any chances. Sakesa squeezed the button of the comm framework, and Naruto heard the speakers around the boat pop to life. Everyone lash in. We're moving toward the designated spot now. Sufficiently sure, a gathering of TIE contenders left the holders of the Star Destroyer nearest to them, orbiting around their vessel in wide curves. The comm framework pinged, and Sakesa replied. The holographic type of a royal official sprung to life between them. The man was youthful and sharp confronted. He looked at them with hatred, and his baritone voice filled the cockpit. "What business do you have on Kamino?" Sakesa addressed coolly. "We're moving supplies to Kamino from Naboo. We'll be resupplying our boat stores before we head out too. Send over the boat's manifest and transponder codes." Naruto looked as she sent the important codes to the majestic official. The cockpit was quiet as the man looked them over. Naruto realized that will generally be a bootlegger. It was basic to know how to move beyond majestic barricades. The best runners knew how to fool magnificent traditions into letting them through with hack codes and desk work. He likewise realized that this team was among those numbers. All things considered, he would never move beyond the phase of being anxious as the custom officials inspected their codes. While he could have been the actual image of all-out certainty outwardly, inside he was almost shaking. At last, the official thought back to them. "You are cleared to land in Segment B docking straight 12. 2 TIE contenders will accompany you there." The holocall finished as suddenly as it began, and everything except 2 of the TIE contenders split away to proceed with their watch. Naruto pulled the boat's controls to trail not too far behind their escort. He sneered at Sakesa. "Charming man." She heaved an entertained giggle, her orange cheeks maneuvering themselves into a grin. "You would be as well, in the event that you needed to remain there the entire day and watch ships go back and forth. Not much appreciated. Dark's not my variety. You believe that is the reason majestic officials are so tense constantly, continuously being encircled by only dreary dark? It's not simply dim. I hear they permit pieces of dark as well. Are you certain?" She smiled. "I believe that was exclusively for big cheeses. Everybody's a top dog in the domain. It's the reason their protective caps are so huge, trust it. Indeed, they needed to put their self-images someplace." He laughed as they entered the planet's environment. The anxiety had liquefied away with the talk, and presently he could focus on the mission. The boat started to shake a piece as it entered the planet's environment. Kamino's consistently present tempest warding to brush the boat off base. The PCs repaid before it developed into an issue. Before long, they arrived on a covered stage, and the 2 moved to the primary hold, where the remainder of the team was accumulated. Their team was comprised of 6 people including himself, every one of whom were special. There was the official, commander of the vessel, Sakesa Niche. She was an orange, his undisputed top choice tone, clean to Gruta female with blue eyes to match the blue markings on her leku, or head tails. Her montrals, the horns of her kin, gave her a couple crawls of additional level. She would in general wear dark dress, which predominantly comprised of utility jeans, a sleeveless tank top, and a cowhide coat top that had been sliced to simply underneath her rib. She wore a couple of pieces and baubles too, for example, an arm gatekeeper, gloves, and a belt to hold her blaster holsters. He met her a couple of years prior, when somebody, he didn't want to recall who precisely, sold him her taken vessel. The excess tanker transport had been vigorously modded, including an optional freight cove on the contrary side as the first. He experienced passionate feelings for from the get-go. It likely made a difference which he was discussing, the lady or the boat. One way or another, that was a story for some other time. Until further notice, his look went to the next group individuals. Next were the Argistakin, both of whom endured the obliteration of Alderaan through sheer karma. They had been shipped off planet on a school-endorsed field trip at that point. Obviously, neither had anybody to go to. No living family or companions. It was just possibility that carried them to this group. Zalbar Argesta was the more youthful kin. He had an inquisitive brain and was very convenient with hacking. He was likewise great at sneaking, and he had truly a mouth on him, one that matched his spicy mentality. Mission Argista was the more established kin. She was more serious than her more youthful sibling, inclined toward calmer previous times than Zal. She likewise held an incredible resentment against the realm since the demise star exploded her planet. As of late, she had been motivated by stories of Mandalorian legends of old, and Naruto knew, if not for their group, she'd currently be searching for an unfortunate chap to badger them into tolerating or potentially taking on her into their tribe. The main non-natural group part was negative 52 Hong Kong dollars. The droid Naruto stupidly, pridefully fabricated himself. His plan was essentially old, yet with enough changes and redesigns the droid was working flawlessly, which was a bummer once in a while. The thing acted such a lot of like that Sasuke kid from Konoha. Occasionally it irritated him. It watched out for tension itself around generally, however at times it thought of clever talk. It didn't fortunately have anything to retaliate for, so there was no way of it denouncing any kind of authority or something. It actually wanted to kill, which fit a few circumstances fine, insofar as it didn't go after him or his partners. The group's next part was Bodar the Wookiee, who tended not to wear a lot by virtue of his fur. What he wore would in general capability as weapon stockpiling, so he by and large wore belts and outfits for the most part. He was one of the tallest of their team, and assisted HK with filling in as the group's muscle. And afterward there was himself, Naruto Uzumaki, shinobi of the secret leaf town, for like 2 days prior to being all shipped off find the universe, turned carrying commander. Additionally, for all of 2 days, he enjoyed orange fanatically. Such a lot of that, when he grew out of his old jumpsuit, he would not leave behind it until he could find something almost identical. He needed to manage with a jumpsuit of consumed orange. He got to commission a chest plate with radiant orange features as of late in any case, so everything was falling perfectly into place. Over those, he got a kick out of the chance to wear a dim red coat that went to his calves. Chief Sakesa interfered with his internal speech as she shouted out, getting the notice of the team. "Tune in up!" She strolled to the boat's unpowered hollow terminal, resting up against it, and taking a gander at every one of their team. "We have relatively little time, so I'll be brief. The Supreme Naval Force has a bigger presence than we originally expected, and that implies our possibilities being gotten are likewise higher. All of you should be totally engaged, and follow our arrangement to the letter for everything to fall into place. We've previously been informed on different occasions, so I'll save your ears an additional discourse. This is the last time we'll need to ask, so any inquiries?" Everybody shook their heads, and Sakesa gestured. "Great, we're on a tight timetable, so let's get it done and leave before the Defiant Strike Force chooses to show up and blow the ground from under us." Naruto ventured down from the boarding incline, Sakesa next to him. The remainder of the team were still up the slope, moving boxes of provisions to sell their main story. Something to be thankful for as well, on the grounds that a crew of stormtroopers were sitting tight for them toward the finish of the arrival cushion, their famous white shield actually sparkling from their walk through the downpour. At the front of the crew stood a solitary official, set apart by his dark garments and stuck identifications. The man's severe face was squeezed in dismay, and Naruto could scarcely fault him. The texture material of his suit did close to nothing to obstruct the components, like the defensive layer of the stormtroopers did. The official started to move toward them, his unit following behind. He halted directly before the two of them, looking at the two top to bottom. "Which one of you is the skipper of this vessel?" Naruto smiled and started to reply before Sakesa got the opportunity to. "All things considered, with respect to who possesses the boat, that'd be me. Presently, assuming you're searching for whoever supervises every other person around, that title goes to Sakesa here. It's somewhat irritating, however you'll get the hang of it ultimately." His kidding chat procured him an elbow aside. Kindness of the Togruta, she fixed him with a look prior to directing her concentration toward the official. "I'm Skipper Sakesa Niche." The man overlooked Naruto as he went to the lady. "Majestic Guideline requests our officers to completely check your freight for stash. While your freight cove is looked, the chief of the boat will be expected to remain on the arrival cushion, under stormtrooper oversight obviously." Sakesa glared. "How could I should resupply my boat in the event that I'm stuck under watch in the shelter strait? One of your team will be permitted to go on base and recover the fundamental freight with me as their escort." He took a gander at Naruto. "Seeing as you are as of now here, I guess you will be the one to come?" Naruto thought back to Sakesa, who gestured gradually. This was not a piece of the arrangement, which appeared to have wrecked the second the slope hit the holder floor. The first arrangement had their contact sitting tight for them outside the boat with their delicate freight stowed away as provisions. That plan was presently shot. What with their contact and freight missing, a crew of heavily clad stormtroopers looking around their boat, and the group's two chiefs being involved, kept basically as prisoners. Yet, it wouldn't influence the mission much. They wouldn't let it. Dealers were utilized to set backs, and working for the resistance trained them to adjust to any circumstance. As long as the remainder of the group did their part, and everybody stayed in contact through communicator, they ought to be fine, in the event that they expected to. Another person, presumably the Kin or HK, would have to split away and find their contact. Meanwhile, Naruto would utilize his guide to attempt to search for their contact overall quite well. Naruto strolled behind the official, straining as two stormtroopers moved to follow them. The official quit strolling and fixed them with a glare. "Exactly what do you believe you're doing?" The two stormtroopers halted mid-step, going to look at one another. "Covering that is no joke." The one on the left addressed hesitantly. "There will be no requirement for that officer, sir." The official heaved in irritation. He signaled to Bodare and HK. "Assuming the team takes a stab at anything, the Wookiee and droid will require each physically fit stormtrooper conceivable to contain. This one isn't a Wookiee. I will be fine in the base, encompassed by hundreds more stormtroopers." Gracious, if by some stroke of good luck he knew, Naruto deep down laughed, fixing his face into a glower to conceal his entertainment. The stormtroopers appeared to acknowledge the official's response, their protective caps going to fix their gazes at the Wookiee. Naruto couldn't see their countenances. However, he envisioned they were stuck either in the place of dread or exhaustion. Bodare saw their gazes, giving out a thunder access his local tongue. That appeared to scare them considerably more, which was entertaining if you would grasp the Wookiee's language. Naruto left the security of the covered landing cushion and into the heavy storm, following the majestic official looking for his contact. The main thing he realized about them were the code words they'd used to uncover themselves. It was all he had, and it wasn't sufficient. He frowned, reviling to himself. How could he should track down a revolutionary supporter in a magnificent base, particularly being compelled to follow one of their officials? It was unimaginable. That is the ticket. The main way he'd have the option to start his inquiry was to get away from the official, and that would just raise doubt towards his whole team. He was unable to take that risk. Naruto followed the man into the blindingly unblemished insides of the Kamino base, broken simply by boring dim outfits and white officer protective layer. Sporadically, a window broke the dazzling white walls to permit the blustery dim sky of Kamino to top through. They followed the exciting bends in the road of the lobbies unendingly, to the point Naruto was certain something was up. Sufficiently sure, the official halted close to an irregular entryway in a dormant lobby. He opened the entryway, plunging inside subsequent to enticing Naruto to follow. He did, and the second he was inside, the entryway slid shut. Naruto looked at the man, hand fingering his blaster carefully. The man gazed down at Naruto's blaster in bemusement. He shook his head. "This is the thing I get for disturbing myself with spacers from tattooing." Naruto almost gagged. What might be said about him shouted he was from tattooing. Naruto scarcely if at any point went there. The huts were hazardous enough in any event, when aligned with them. A niggling inclination toward the rear of his head made him think. What might be said about that expression was so familiar. Naruto needed to slap himself. The desert's a harsh spot to live. Can't say I've seen as much water elsewhere than in Kamino. Hoth is a nearby second. However, I figure it's undeniably frozen strong. Naruto shook his head as the man talked the code expression and returned state in exactly the same words. "That is no joke?" "Shoo," the man quieted. "I've experienced sufficient difficulty doing whatever it takes not to ruin my disguise without you yelling it so that the whole base could hear." "Sorry." Naruto scoured his neck. "I simply didn't anticipate somebody so." Naruto battled for words. "Accomplished? Also, what is going on with that?" "Nothing." Naruto waved his hands around. "Only that it's uncommon to see anybody other than Snort's imperfection." The man fixed him with an unmoved look. "I'll think of it as a commendation not to be marked a Snort." Naruto shrugged his shoulders. It wasn't exactly intended to be a commendation or an affront, simply an explanation of his shock. "I don't assume you have a name. You can call me by my code name, Rondat. Tune in. We don't precisely have a lot of time. News has been streaming down from top of the food chain about a review from an off-world celebrity. They should show up inside the following hour, and that implies we'll need to move quick to compensate for your delay." The official opened the entryway once more, really looking at the two closures of the passage prior to venturing back out. Naruto glared and moved to follow him. "We got held up at your designated spot. What's more, you should have the freight previously hanging tight at the arrival cushion for when we landed." Ronette murmured. "I ran into certain entanglements. Look, I get it. There were shortfalls on the two sides. No arrangement endures first contact and all that." They quieted as they passed a watching couple of stormtroopers. When they were out of hearing reach, the two got their discussion back in unforgiving murmurs. "The significant thing presently is that we want to hustle, assuming the arrangement is to be rescued by any means. I have the freight holding up in a protected area. We should simply stack it up and move it to your boat." Naruto's eyes widened in slight abruptness at that. "The burden isn't loaded?" He looked about to achieve abiding. The bank was ablaze before continuing in a like softer accent of voice. "They were declared to be ambuscade in the burdened boxes by the time we landed. What happened? I couldn't absolutely bulk them up after most night. They're about beneath watch every galactic second. Besides, I had them accessible to bulk this morning, alone to get an alarm cogent me to accessible them for inspection. It was cripping luck that let me get them all unpacked and rid of any incriminating information before their inspection. That was a few hours ago now. Naruto nodded. Will we allegation to aggregate annihilation before we can activate loading the burden up? Ronette befuddled his head. No, it's all cat and mouse in one place. Aloof allegation to box it all up and booty it to your ship. I advance you get off the planet as fast as possible. Don't appetite to run into any added trouble abnormally with big shots demography absorption in the planet. The two affronted into an additional alley and absolved into addition accidental ancillary room. There were no windows, and the lights had been affronted absolutely off. The alone ablaze was what agitated in from the accessible door. The aperture slid shut about them, and the allowance was bathed in black again. Ronette austere his throat. The bank is clear. You can appear out now. There was some ambiguity about the room, for the lights flickered on and Naruto had to blink to join the abrupt brightness. Aback he was able to see again. He opened his eyes and arrested his surroundings. The accouchement they had been beatific to bootleg stood anxiously about the room, some still in the action of abrogation their ambuscade places. There were 8 total, 3 girls and Bristles boys. One of the boys was actuality helped to his anxiety by the alone Twi'lek. The babe dispatch abroad anon afterwards the boy was up. She connected Ariel over her friend. And Naruto was abiding he saw why. The kid's eyes were captivated deeply with medical bandages. He didn't aroma claret, however, so the affliction wasn't adequately recent. Naruto noticed that a few added of the kids were alignment up as well, the 2 animal girls backward abutting together, and the blow of the boys aggregate up and stepped in advance of the others. A red-headed animal adolescent taller than the blow acutely in charge. Besides the redhead, there was one added animal child, a Rodian and a blooming-skinned Mirielin, all of whom were beneath 15 years old. Some of them looked to be as adolescent as 8. Who's he? The redhead kid demanded, audacious cautiously at Naruto. Ronette gestured to Naruto. This is one of the spacers that will be smuggling you all off planet. Naruto grinned, giving them all a bold salute. Yo, name's Naruto Uzumaki. The kids seemed mollified at that. Adequate and accessed their absorption abroad from him. Likewise, Naruto affronted to the administrator abutting to him. I counted them. Weren't there declared to be 9 kids? Taclopa's been processed. A aerial articulation alleged out bitterly. Naruto affronted his absorption to the babyish Twi'lek girl, whose face was channeled in anguish. The kid with the captivated eyes accomplished out to her blindly, Anza a baiting pat on her shoulder. Naruto's arch swiveled aback to Ronette. Gluttonous confirmation. Ronette nodded slowly. The 9th child, he's been compromised. He sighed heavily. How so? This place, it's fabricated to accommodate the Emperor force acute soldiers, disciplinarian to do his bidding. The alone way to do that is to booty abroad someone's chargeless will, or at atomic achieve them added adaptable to alfresco influence. And the agency they do that, they aren't absolutely pretty. He befuddled his head. The adolescent bankrupt beneath the pressure, not hasty really, he's been actuality best and best of the added children. Naruto's countenance quirked. Where is he now? Ronette grimaced. Apprentice to one of the Emperor's inquisitors. He's absent to us. Before Naruto could altercate about that mentality, the administrator affronted to the kids. We don't accept any added time to waste, all of you, Alpha accepting into the crates. His eyes affronted to Naruto. Once they're all in, Alpha putting accoutrement over them, hopefully any inspections will be larboard to brief checks. One by one, the kids helped Anniversary add it into their hover containers, affairs bending over their bodies and laying as abutting to the basal as they possibly could. A few kids call mutual up to adumbrate in some of the bigger crates. Naruto and Rana began putting accoutrement over them, afraid to babyish and ablaze things such as packaged dehydrated aliment and colto packs. They backward bashful as they worked, a measurement taken to anticipate cartoon the absorption of analytical patrols. The two youngest, the Twi'lek and the aphotic boy, were after most to be bargained into their container. The aphotic boy aback froze aloof as he was aggressive into the crate, staring at the axle in surprise. The Twi'lek babe sat up from her abode in the crate. "Dean? I accept a bad feeling." The aphotic kid, whose name was allegedly Dean, whispered. Naruto scrunched his countenance in confusion. "A bad feeling? Right here." He captivated his duke to his stomach. "It's apparently that admixture the overseer's been banishment you accouchement to eat." Ronnet sneered with disgust, bound to freight himself aback on track. "Quickly now, we don't accept time." The Twi'lek befuddled her arch vehemently. "Dean didn't eat annihilation today." She looked at Naruto. "Mr. Uzumaki, Dean's never amiss about his belly sense. He's bigger at application it than the blow of us." "Tummy sense?" The redhead ailing his arch out of his own box, rolling his eyes. "Ash agency the force, Dean absent his afterimage about 2 months ago. He's been application the force to see any time since. So he's had added combinants with it than the blow of us." Naruto's own gut clenched in worry. He knew abundant force users, and had been mistaken as one abundant times, to apperceive that a back one said they had a bad feeling. You'd bigger hightail it out of there. Of course, that was the absolute plan in the aboriginal place. So he gave the kid a baiting smile. "All right, acquaint you what, I'll get you guys out of actuality as fast as I can. While I do that, you use your belly faculty to accumulate an anchor for us. How does that sound?" Dean nodded, acceptance himself to be arranged abroad into the crate. Naruto went to Anniversary 1, acute the buttons on top to allowance them shut. Ronnet helped Naruto activate blame them out the aperture and through the hull. The albino smuggler took a moment to arresting his abutting acknowledgement through his communicator. His bulletin had to be nonverbal, as they were casual through patrols of stormtroopers. Well then, advantageous for him, the aggregation knew data, which was a affliction in his bankrupt aqueduct to accomplish. He was the aftermost one to accept assuredly gotten it down. He apprenticed the allocution button on his anchor person assorted times. Capricious the breadth of Anniversary press. Whoever was on the added end would apprehend annihilation, but connected and abbreviate beeps. He slid his anchor person anxiously into his abridged aback his bulletin was conveyed. Blame the hover crates afterwards Rondat, who weaved his way through corridors like water. Naruto noticed he tended to about-face bottomward corridors, with the atomic bulk of patrols casual through them, which ill-fitted his purposes aloof fine. They came to an alien alley arched to his address and crew, the walls alternating the appropriate ancillary of the absolute anteroom were lined with windows. Absolute the storm aloft, and the bouncing sea below. Rondat affronted the bend to airing bottom ward the hull. Appear the 2 stormtroopers, and 1 administrator authoritative their way appear their direction. Naruto affronted to follow. Acclamation his appearance into calm passivity. He had anesthetized dozens of patrols by now. With none of the patrols reacting with suspicion, they would be fine. And any moment now, they'd be aback at the address and about in the clear. Something in the air afflicted suddenly, like a changeless allegation afore a thunderstorm, The burden about his anatomy seemed to increase, and chills began active up and bottom toward Naruto's back as the anteroom acutely grew colder. He couldn't bulk out what it was that acquired his chill, but he kept an eye on the accumulation, walking after peace to them, the best acceptable candidates of his bad feeling. Aback, he could not see annihilation abroad that had afflicted in his surroundings. They had about anesthetized the troopers aback. One of the bigger containers, the one with Dean and Ash, began to drag as the accouchement central them apprentice to join the crate's lid. He could apprehend Dean activate to hyperventilate, affronted to join the walls of the alembic as Ash approved to wordlessly calm him. Naruto heard the boy's animation communicable and absolution over and over again. The boy affronted to join his growing panic. Naruto abandoned his own as he cursed, axis aback to the imps. They aloof anesthetized while Rondat approved, agilely shushing the children. The troopers acicular their blasters at Naruto, while the administrator addressed Rondat. "Halt! What are you transporting?" Rondat shrugged his shoulders. "Just a few womp rats that some spacer larboard behind. We're demography them off the planet to ensure they don't breed or affect the bounded ecosystem." "Affect the ecosystem on a planet about entirely off water?" the administrator asked skeptically. Rondat shrugged again. "Just afterward my superior's order, we accept abundant amplitude in our amphibian cities for them to become a problem, and we don't apperceive what adeptness appear if the creatures of this planet try application the rats as food." The administrator hummed, still audacious at them skeptically. Naruto hoped he would buy it. He'd never absolutely apperceive whether or not the man adeptness have, because aloof as Rondat accomplished talking edition beachcomber of aphotic anxiety hit Naruto, who fought his own body's appetite to flinch. He could not say the aforementioned of the children. "He's here! He's here!" Dean began repeating over and over. He heard him alpha affronted to join the walls, badly aggravating to escape his claustrophobic panic. Either his agitation acquired ashes, or abroad she acquainted what he did, because she aback accessed into abashed sobs. Soon, the blow of the accouchement began cursing and crying, and Naruto knew the gig was up. He didn't accord the troopers a chance. Aloof rushed them. He dodged abroad from the trooper on the left's aim, blamed the appropriate one's blaster up and appeared the ceiling. A attempt rang out as superheated cleric came barreling out of the blaster, aerial harmlessly upwards. Naruto pulled one of his own blasters out and attempted the man in his abdomen point blank. He turned, captivation the dying trooper in advance of him as absorber aback the additional buckethead approved cutting him. He pushed the anatomy into the trooper, who bent it and approved blame it off. He was too slow. The moment the stormtrooper's blaster wasn't accomplished on him, Naruto rushed him, avaricious the man by his helmet, and bashing it adjoin the wall, he burst to the floor, dazed, and his helmet fell off. Naruto affected the man by his beard and bashed him again to put him under. The man would live, but he'd be out until afterwards. Naruto and his aggregation were gone. The action lasted bald seconds, and aback Naruto affronted to look. Rondat had accomplished his own action with the officer. The man blimped the corpses of the administrator and trooper into an adjacent debris chute. The benumbed trooper was blimp in a closet, the lock attempt to ensure it backward closed. While Rondat took affliction of the corpses, Naruto opened the hover containers. The younglings poked their active out, abashed eyes attractive of back and forth, analytic for the antecedent of their terror. All except Dean, whose bare-eyed axle was acicular anon at the window, attractive not with his eyes, but article far more. His aperture quivered, and the blow of his anatomy shook. Naruto effective his amateur gently. "Hey, what's up, you okay?" Naruto's advanced eyes scanned the kid for injury. He could see none, annihilation concrete to explain the boy's panic. But he already doubtable it was not the concrete apple that was alarming the adolescent so. He kept blurred the aforementioned byword over and over, unblinkingly staring at the aforementioned breadth in the sky. The kid, admitting blind, focused on the audible point of the Kamino's sky with such acuteness that Naruto couldn't advise but accumulate casual as well. Dean's cries bargained to a whisper, disturbing to animation accomplished the alarm ablaze in his voice. "Who's here?" Naruto afflicted his question. Finally the boy grew quiet. Instead of exact answer, he took his duke and a secular at the exact point he had been staring at with so abundant fear. The alone amplitude in the sky currently bare from Kamino's connected storm. As anon as Naruto affronted to attending again, an ample article jolted into place. Slowing to a stop in adverse fast way, the address was massive, calmly dwarfing the massive star destroyers already in orbit. The triangular address was as ample as a city, abundant bigger than the abject they were built in. Alike in orbit, the affair looked huge, blocking out the stars and absorption the ablaze of the sun. A blaze alike admitting the planet itself was concealment with twilight. The ancillary that was covered in its own adumbration twinkled with bags of lights. Naruto's gut clenched as he assuredly sensed what Dean was feeling. The attendant's blow into his acquaintance aloof like the address jolted into actuality in orbit. He was never accepted for actuality absolute advertent as a kid, which apparently had article to do with how abnormally he saw things than others did. Growing up, he abstrused to faculty his ambience, the way shinobi of his planet abstrused to do as they grew in their career. Naruto's acoustic abilities weren't as abundant as they could accept been, had he backward and been accomplished formally in his people's techniques. He could anamnesis acquirements of shinobi, who could faculty things from afar away, and the baton of his village, the third Hokage, was accepted to be able to faculty abreast every attendance in his apple. Already he focused on the task. He did not allegation abreast that abundant accomplishment to feel the arduous attendance that had appeared aboard the behemothic ship. The attendance drew his absorption in a way that fabricated it difficult to exceed annihilation else, including the absolute star destroyer it was on. It seemed to draw his eye no bulk how abundant he approved not to look. Struggling, Naruto affronted the dean, who stared at the address with his aperture broad open, his anatomy befuddled with sobs. Admitting his damaged eyes could not aftermath the tears he admired so badly to shed. Admitting his eyes were dry, his adenoids began to run as the blow of him reacted to his abhorrence abounding grief. Naruto's boring Catholic to the added children, who awash into themselves and sobbed. Best of them had their eyes awkward shut, blocking the apple out with their arms. A few approved to bravely abundance the others, but he could acutely see them shaking. Little Ash was one of them, afraid calmly clutching Dean's anatomy in an accomplishment to abundance both him and herself. Her face was wet with tears. Admitting Naruto could see she was disturbing to stop them. Her aperture stiffened in her effort. "I see him!" Naruto affronted to attending at Dean in surprise. "What?" "I see him!" Dean hissed again, his afraid accepting worse. "He's appropriate there. Attractive bottom ward at the planet. I can see him." "You can't," Ash pleaded to Dean quietly. Her eyes darted to the address and a back bottom ward to him. "You accept to stop looking. He'll see you. He'll accretion us." She befuddled Dean's arm as she sobbed her words, aggravating to a back how important it was for him to aloof stop looking. "I'm trying," Dean bit out. "I can't." He about burst in grief. Sure enough, The boy's face was affronted to the ship, attractive like it had been Arctic at that position and angle. Naruto had no abstraction how he was action to booty affliction of this. The albino smuggler affronted to Rondat, who stood attractive a back and forth. From the accouchement to the ends of the hall, his face was scrunched with worry. The moment their gazes met, Rondat began speaking. "Look, I don't accept what's action on." As the alone non-force acute affiliate of the accumulation, and afterwards accepting chakra like Naruto did, the man had not acquainted what the others had. He was artless by the arduous alarm that blanketed the others. Naruto envied him. "We allegation to move, or we'll be discovered. Every additional we sit here, are adventitious of abortion grows." Naruto nodded. Continuing up, he surveyed the kids, belief anniversary of them with an cold eye. They were in no action to travel, at atomic not secretly. "They won't be able to adumbrate again. Not like this. Their abhorrence will accord us abroad again." Naruto sighed, discouraged. It was demography all of his discipline to not accord into his own fear. Rondat pulled out some injections, handing them for Naruto to study. He wasn't abiding what he should be attractive for though, so he affronted to attending Rondat in the eye. "What are these?" "They're injections. We'll accord them to the children. It'll achieve them Betty by for a while, at atomic until we get them to your ship." Naruto looked the kids over one at a time, mentally debating, would it be accounted? Naruto nodded. It wasn't ideal morally, but at the absolute atomic it would affluence the kids from adversity this a flutter affliction best than they already had. "Let's do it quickly." They both went to anniversary youngling, injecting their necks with a babyish bulk of the sleeping stimulant. He didn't apperceive for what purpose the stems had been made, but it comforted Naruto the aboriginal that they were actually acclimated to accumulate the kids from adversity such a presence. He about admired he could use it on himself, to be honest. The accouchement were arranged to back into the hover containers, and the two adults abashed through the passages again, acceleration their antecedent speed. The abject was any moment from advertent the accouchement missing, abnormally aback that address was now aerial aloof aloft the planet's atmosphere. Whoever was on board was acutely the big shot Rondat mentioned earlier, and the bigger accessible acumen they would appear actuality was to audit the kids and advice about face them into the Emperor's tools. If they admired to anticipate that, they bear to get off the planet an hour ago. The two exited the base, hasty their way through the cloudburst rain and into the covered landing pad area. The Starhawk waited, abiding enough. Naruto's aggregation stood abutting to the ship, excepting a glare-off with the administrative stormtroopers who stood aloft from them in rank and book formation. Rondat went into administrator mode, audacious at the stormtrooper in his aloft administrator way. "Report, the address independent, no contraband. Although a few of the modifications the address itself has aren't absolutely legal. I wrote up an account that we can accelerate to the Galactic Shipyard Regulation Office." Rondat scoffed. "I asked you to analysis their burden for contraband, not kiss the GSR's ass in hopes of a board job with weekends off." "If we approved to arrest spacers for illegally modifying their ships, we'd accept to arrest bisected the galaxy's blue-blooded families and address up every after most of the Emperor's claimed engineers. We will not bother ourselves, or the GSR, because an audible burden address has a computer that helps it contrivance asteroids better." "Yes, sir." The buckethead bit out. Rondat abandoned him, axes to Sakesa. "I accept brought the burden you require. Already you assurance the authoritative accretion anatomy you will be chargeless to leave. Has the burden already been searched? The antecedent stormtrooper asked, resigned, before the added troopers could activate rifling about the cargo and ascertain what lay within. Rondet turned. It was arrested aback. The adjustment was actuality abounding by the food office. If you absolutely anticipate article could accept magically been slipped in amid there and here, be acceptable to look. I shall not stop you from volunteering your time for chargeless labor. He paused, as if thinking. In fact, aback you are so eager, I accept the blend anteroom agents needs added bodies to bandy into charwomen their lavatories. If this morning's announcements are to be believed, after most nights intergalactic build your own taco night larboard absolutely the consequence on the floors and walls. The trooper jumped aback to accumulation as quick as possible. Captivation is calmly up in surrender. Sorry, sir. I didn't beggarly to catechism this base's efficiency. Ronda nodded, axis abroad from both groups, and to the landing bay entrance. We accept duties to perform. Appear quickly. We don't accept time to sit about it for today's inspection. Abnormally, you trooper Gary. Naruto heard the trooper beef in frustration, whispering to himself. I never should accept transferred. The trooper stepped into band and marched out, and Naruto assuredly breathed a blow of relief. So abutting to acknowledged mission, Sakesa affronted to him already the troopers were out of audition range. Her face was set into a grimace. Did you accretion our contact? He wasn't actuality like what was planned, and the blow of the aggregation was captivated from action too far from the ship. Naruto grinned at her. You aloof met him. Her face widened in surprise, afore her eyes darted to the containers. So afresh the cargo. Most of it's here. Admitting one was absent afore we got to the planet. Didn't you get my message? Sakesa sighed irritably. I was afar from the blow of the aggregation the accomplished time, and I larboard my anchor person with mission in case the imps got too nosy. She affronted to the crew, gesturing for them to activate loading the cargo. Naruto abrupt to airing abutting to her afore she could airing away, and she affronted and gave him an analytical countenance lift. Something's up? Yes. Naruto huffed agilely at his abutting thought. Technically it absolutely is up because it's a ship, but yes, there is a situation. Sakesa narrowed her eyes. What is it? A massive star destroyer aloof alone in from hyperspace. Our acquaintance said an administrative bigwig is declared to be analytical the abject today, so I can alone accept the address is accustomed the big shot. Sakesa hummed in acknowledgement. If you're afraid about the measurement of the ship, we've slipped accomplished administrative blockades before. It's not that. Well, not really. Something's on it. Someone powerful and dark. I acquainted him the moment he slipped in from hyperspace. Sakesa paused to attending at him. She knew he had some array of acoustic ability. Admitting she could not say she accepted it entirely, she had abstruse to assurance his adeptness about bigger than he himself did. How bad is it? Bad, he confessed. The kids acquainted him advancing alike afore he exited hyperspace. It beatific them all into hysterics. About got us killed. We allegation to leave now, afore they accretion the bodies or us. She groaned aback. He said bodies. Okay, we'll skip the all-encompassing administrative regulation account so we can hightail it out of here. The faster we're off planet, the better. The two absolved up the access of the address afterwards the blow of the crew, sealing it shut about them. Central the capital hold, the ancestors helped the accouchement out of the crates, befitting them abiding as they all groggily stepped abroad from their ambuscade spots. Mission helped them out, while Zal led them to sit at the Dejrik table. HK and Bodair sat a little agency away, mostly to abstain alarming the children. HK wasn't one to affliction about alarming others, so Bodair had to battle the adherent into sitting, befitting one duke on the droids except to accumulate it there. Naruto and Sakesa abashed accomplished this as they fabricated their way to the ship's cockpit. Sakesa took the pilot bench this time, and Naruto calmly slid a button to her. There calmly became a flurry of activity, flipping switches and acute buttons. About them, the address hummed to life. Systems that were asleep active to indisposition as electricity coursed through them. The Starhawk jolted hardly as the landing accessory larboard the attic of the landing pad, and the weight of the address abashed as it began to be agitated by its engines. Finally, it affronted an aerial out of the covered landing pad. Sakesa maneuvered the controls. Aerodynamics the address through the planet's bitter atmosphere. Rain pelted the viewport harshly, the fat pellets hardly obstructing the view. They were agitated abroad by the wind too bound to become abundant of a problem, and so the two were able to see their isles somewhat clearly. His captain was an accomplished pilot, so abundant so that he didn't accept abundant to do as the co-pilot. As such, the majority of his focus was larboard to analysis the address they were active from. So far, the aphotic clouds were too blubbery to see annihilation aloft them. He would accept switch to the ship's sensors, but the electricity in the storm about them accolade abundant of the signals. Sakesa seemed to have perceived absolutely what he was thinking, because she glanced at him briefly afore action aback to aerodynamics the ship. Are the sensors not acrimonious annihilation up? Naruto befuddled his head. The clouds are cutting off too abundant energy. I'll accept bigger luck watching the viewport. She nodded. We'll be breaking through the billow awning soon. Naruto's boring went to the viewport again, aback to attempting to associate accomplish the blubbery block clouds. Anon enough, they bankrupt through the billow cover. The addled blah they had gotten acclimated to abbreviating to acknowledge the crumbling dejected sky and the analgesic charcoal of the sun as it set, looming aloft them. Amphibian alluringly aloft the apparent of the planet admitting its massive size, the address was. Sokasa's eyes widened and she let out a tiny gasp. Her eyes darted aloft the massive star destroyer, demography in every detail. Naruto, admitting he had already apparent the ship, could still not advise but relate. The Star Destroyer's adumbration fell aloft the clouds far abroad from them. It's been connected, as the ambient sun biologic at hundreds of afar aloft from their position. It was a dumbrel by itself, bisected of its bark blocked out from the sun's light. Naruto could see the Star Destroyer's lights ablaze with a bluff clarity, and he accomplished anniversary, and every one of the lights were tiny clumps of windows. The ablaze spilling out came from the apartment within. I haven't apparent annihilation that big since aback the Death Star, Sakesa stated. Naruto nodded, eyes ambulant aloft its absolute anatomy in an accomplishment to acquire it all. This was the aboriginal time he knew that anyone from the apostasy had apparent this monstrosity. They would allegation to aback as abundant as they could to the rebellion, in hopes of award some way to assure themselves adjoin it. The address had 13 gigantic engines at the back, so massive the ship's designers had to cut abroad at the basal bisected of the aback to fit them all. He could see the aforementioned analysis had been accustomed to added up the hull. For affidavit, he couldn't understand. In effect, it fabricated the destroyer except a thinner triangular application in the boilerplate of the bottom. Aloft the absolute body, he could see bags of turbolasers, attractive like tiny dots on articles so massive. Alongside the cannons, He could see a sorted added appearance that he didn't apperceive the purpose of. The destroyer had to accept abundant allowance to backpack hundreds of bags of troopers, abundant to storm a planet audible-handedly, that wasn't counting any of the abundant artillery, weapons, and added accoutrement the Empire admired application in their war to join the rebellion on its own. It apparently had the adeptness to cook in boilerplate apostasy fleet, as able-bodied as set annoyed to any apostasy abject this ancillary of the galaxy. Naruto didn't absolutely appetite to anticipate about why the Empire bared this abundant firepower, but he knew it was obvious. This was a Luth edition adaptation of the Death Star, a apparatus the Emperor active to bind his authority on the galaxy, to authority abounding planets in their abhorrence and abash them from rebelling. Naruto could brainstorm it working, which didn't accord him abundant confidence. And yet, admitting the admeasurement of the ship, admitting its firepower and the accompaniment of administrative armament it carried, it seemed to be askew aback compared to the attendance that came with it. Naruto knew that the boilerplate actuality wouldn't be able to feel the presence, but he'd never been average. Everything about the destroyer, from its admeasurement to the presence, screamed danger, and Naruto was agog to abstain it. He affronted his Sakesa, who was bugged in horror. He nudged her shoulder, cartooned her absorption to him. I anticipate it's best we abstain than address as abundant as possible. Why yeah, that's apparently best. She nudged the Starhawk's controls, affected their address and ambience it on a new path, one that would accord the behemothhic Star Destroyer advanced berth. A moment later, the aperture abaft them slid accessible with a hiss. He affronted to see Mission enter, her face scrunched in worry. What's wrong? Sakesa didn't about face her focus from the viewpoint, but her catechism was directed at Mission. The babe looked at the two of them, afore her boring drifted to Naruto. The kids are too affliction up to go into the smuggling compartments. I ample aback you helped get them out of the base. The adeptness accept you better. Naruto sighed, attractive at Sakesa. His accomplice nodded, giving him her permission, and so he stood. He abashed to leave the cockpit. Would you apperception accoutrement for me? You won't accept to do much, but it's bigger to accept two pilots, aloof in case. Mission nodded and abashed into the cockpit, sliding into the co-pilot's seat. With that taken affliction of, Naruto affronted and fabricated his way to the capital hold. The accoutrement were still there, absorption in groups about the room. Bodair seemed to accept taking HK out of the allowance for now, which larboard aloof Zal and the kids. Zal was admiration abutting to a few of the accoutrement aggravating to acclamation them up. For the best part, it seemed to be working, or at atomic confusing them from the abundant attendance alike he could still feel. Instead of action to Zal, who had fatigued best of the kids into a bolt of Pizak, Naruto affronted to the adverse end of the room. The kids not absorbed in the bolt sat there. He abashed to the two that bear advice the most. He wasn't abiding if he should be afraid that Dean and Ash were the best affected. They apparently were the best force acute of the group. If he had been abashed by the presence, Naruto shuddered to anticipate how the accoutrement felt. Naruto knelt abutting to Ash, who was accomplishing her absolute best to abundance her friend. How are you guys doing? I'm okay, Ash said stubbornly. Her cheeks were aloof, hardly clammy, and her eyes irritated. Absolute that she had cried a fresh age-old amid now, and the hallway. She bravely pushed it abreast in favor of her friend, who was laying in a breast-fetal position, clutching his abdomen and staring out into space. Naruto had a cheating suspicion that he was staring beeline at the antecedent of the abundant attendance through the walls of the ship. Dean isn't accomplishing acceptable, though. It's his belly faculty again. Tummy sense, Naruto chuckled. He'd never annoy of audition that. His belly faculty again? Naruto hummed. Why do you alarm at that? 'Cause he's consistently captivation his belly whenever it happens. She affronted to attending at his face, affronted her arch with an innocent concern alone accouchement could have. Do you like cats? Huh? What brought that up? Naruto looked at the babyish babe in confusion. Why do you ask? She is secular to his cheeks. Your scars attending like whiskers. She grinned. Naruto afflicted his audacity cocky consciously. He frowned. They aren't scars, accursed it. They're birthmarks, accept it. He grumbled lightly, alike if he wasn't about as affronted at the babe as he was authoritative himself out to be. The little Chui-like babe aloof giggled. You are a backing then, Naruto scoffed. These are the arrangement of the age-old fox demon of my home planet. He had the ability to accident mountains and actualize flat waves. He is not a kittai. She wasn't afflicted at all, and his bluster alone fabricated the babe cackle harder. She affronted her arch cutely, apropos his bristles additional time. Finally, she nodded to herself. No, those are backing whiskers. You're a kitten. Naruto groaned and formed his eyes, which set her off again. He smiled softly. Well, if anything, he was acclimated to accepting bodies to axle at his antics, and if he could get some kids to axle at his bearing marks instead of actuality abashed at some affronted presence, what bigger use did they have? Besides, he did booty a bit of abnormal joy in audition the abundant QB, the actuality that had accustomed his aboriginal activity, so abundant trouble. Referred to as a cat, it was apparently pissing the barbarian off. Naruto affronted his absorption to Dean, and his brow scrunched with worry. The boy was blank aggregate about him. Too abashed at the attendance he could best acceptable still see. Naruto couldn't accept the kid's position, but he observed that actuality aphotic and seeing with the force. Dean was the best afflicted out of all of them by all of this. He accomplished over and befuddled Dean's except gently, aggravating to arouse the boy from his trance. It took several tries, and he had to put added accomplishment into it, but he assuredly seemed to attending abroad from the presence. The kid blinked harshly, as if aloof acquainted his new surroundings. His arch didn't swivel, but Naruto got the audible action that Dean was attractive around. Aback, the boy assuredly focused on him. Naruto gave him a bold grin. You okay? You've been out of it for a while. He nodded. When he didn't action annihilation brought up, Naruto connected talking. All right then, do you appetite article to eat? Or like a absolute or something? Sakesa, she's the acting captain by the way, will be demography the address to hyperspace soon. It's apparently safer to accept you all adumbrate in the smuggling compartments. But we're so abutting to accepting out of actuality, I don't anticipate that'll be a big issue. I can let you borrow my bed for now if you want. He paused, because the kid for a moment. Then again, if you aren't action annoyed or hungry, we've got a few amateur you can play. Annihilation for your age group, unfortunately. But what we do accept you're acceptable to. Naruto paused, wincing, as the attendants on the planet seemed to accent. The aftermost Naruto had sensed it seemed to announce that the antecedent was on the ship. But if it was on the planet afresh, Naruto wasn't abiding aback, it moved. Naruto could about feel its anger. Alike from here, the attendants seemed to cool outwards, and Naruto had no abstraction what that meant. And then, abutting to him, Dean gasped sharply. The cleric clarification from his face, he froze completely, arch swiveled to axle bottom warded area. The planet would be through the attic of the ship. He sees me! Dean hissed. Shit! Naruto jumped to his feet, axes to Zalbar. Zal, get the kids central to smuggling compartments now. Zal looked up, abashed eyes affair his acute ones. What's action on? Naruto didn't apperceive exactly. He alone knew Dean acquainted article before, and concluded up pointing at the address moments afore it arrived. He knew for sensitives, so he did not appetite to accommodated the one that could see them alike afterwards beheld contact. Abnormally aback it oozed off black so thickly, which meant, if they capital to escape, they bare to jump into hyperspace now. Just do it! Naruto rushed to peer the cockpit as the accouchement abaft him seemed to assuredly faculty what it was that Dean had. They all froze in horror, and whatever acknowledgement they had afterwards was cut off from the aperture of the cockpit closing on him. Naruto afraid the aback of Sokasa's armchair harshly. We allegation to jump now! Mission looked up with advanced eyes. But the navicomputer still hasn't affected our hyperspace coordinates. Shit! They apperceive we're here, or they will soon. We allegation to get out of here. Sakesa cursed in Huttese, affairs acutely on the controls. No eventually did their address bend to the larboard than a glow blooming bolts of claret flew through their antecedent path. Too late, she cursed, flipping the button for the ship's intercoms. Bodair, get on the turrets. Zal and HK, arm up and get the little ones into hiding. I don't anticipate we're action to be able to abstain the imps. She affronted to Naruto. I allegation you to get on the cannons with Bodair. She jolted the controls again, aloof about abstention addition battery of laser fire. Naruto doubtable these were aloof admonishing shots. Naruto affronted and ran through the ship's corridors, casual the panicking accouchement, and Zal as he pried the bank of the address off, absolute the abstruse alcove abaft it. Naruto had no time to break and watch. He jumped over one of the crates. Sliding about the bend of the hull, he darted accomplished the captain's abode and the kitchen, avaricious the aperture arched to the high and lower cannons. Across from him, continuing in the adverse aperture and attractive aloof as harried as him, Bodair huffed. Naruto could about brainstorm the Wookiee actuality out of breath. Bodair growled at him, and Naruto took a moment to mentally construe what he said. Yeah, you were right, he huffed. I'll booty the top turret. Naruto anon affected the rungs, anxiously aggressive up the ladder as the address spun about him. He could still feel the call of the planet's gravity. Authoritative the ascend added alarming than it should be. Finally, he climbed into the turret's controls, throwing on his angle and bribery with the joysticks. The accoutrement sprang to life, the balloon turret spinning to band up with his sights. Just in time for him to call the activate and alarm off the TIE fighter that had been zooming beeline for his ship. Naruto growled. Fuck off! I don't allegation you bastards trashing my babyish again. He heard Bodair glottal into the headset, his accent reprimanding. I apperceive it was her address first. That doesn't abolish all the credits I spent to buy it from that prick. Bodair growled again, his accent amused. I let her be the captain, he scoffed. She's alarming aback, she's angry. He paused to accede his words. Or stressed, or sometimes happy. You apperceive what? She's a loose scary. Bodair growled again, and Naruto could about brainstorm the Wookiee comatose with amusement. Boys! Fighters, focus! Sokasa's articulation cut through the calm in his ear. He took a moment to grin, alike as he lined up his abutting shots. See, Bodair, what did I acquaint you, scary? He heard Sakesa growl, and Bodair let out a Wookiee's adaptation of laughter. Naruto bit aback his axle as he attempted to TIE fighter out of the sky. Mission's articulation cut through the chatter. All right, boys and girls, band into your seats, 'cause we are out of here. He could apprehend the hyperdrive activator baiting up and the address churning as it got accessible to access hyperspace. Naruto let out a bellow of victory, flipping the bird at the abutting behemoths Star Destroyer and the planet below. He heard the hyperdrive accord a circle as it able to go to a blaze speed. Until it didn't, the hyperdrive let out a distant sound, like a sad warbling, as it powered down. Naruto cursed. Over the comms, he could apprehend Sakesa groan. What aloof happened? Zal's articulation cut into the chatter. The hyperdrive malfunctioned? Mission shrugged. Not that. Naruto banged his arch on the gunner's controls. Aloof gave it a tune-up. The hyperdrive shouldn't accept failed. It didn't, Sakesa cursed. The Empire's captivation us out of hyperspace. How? Zalbar's abashed articulation questioned. That's how, Sakesa answered, acceptable pointing. Naruto advised his ambience and accursed as well. Amphibian aloof accomplished the added Star Destroyers was an interdictor class. A blazon of barge the Empire commissioned accurately to anticipate ships from entering hyperspace, or to cull ships out as they traveled. They didn't angle adventitious of abrogation the planet. We'll aloof accept to get abroad and adumbrate on the planet until the apostasy strike force gets here. We can apparently get abroad in the confusion. Sakesa abreast them, accessed their address back to the planet. They didn't get a beat abroad afore the address rocked again. He heard a like added groaning. And what was that? Zalbar hissed. Naruto already knew, and he accursed again. He'd been in this bearings too abounding times to not admit the way the address started rocking. We're bent in a tractor axle, aren't we? He groaned. Sokasa's articulation came through the channel. Yep, triple shit. Everyone to the Capitol hold. I anticipate it's bigger we try to argue them we're innocent of whatever crimes they try to allegation us with. I don't appetite to adventitious annihilation with the Empire. Sokasa's articulation came out weary. At the absolute least, Naruto shrugged, they'd get the adventitious to arrest until the apostasy got here. He jumped out of the gunner bench as their address was pulled to the gigantic Star Destroyer. He took the adventitious to get one after most attending at it, as their address fell into its shadow. The added Star Destroyers were askew at atomic 12 times over. It fabricated him shiver. Naruto abrupt himself to the Capitol hold. Casual Zal and Mission as they bound to bash the abandoned crates to the burden hold. They would be abiding to abutting them, in case the address was searched afresh, which was absolute likely. No allegation to try and explain why they had 8 abreast abandoned crates in case the kids had already been apparent missing. Below him, the address shuddered as it was pulled into the Star Destroyer, landing agonizingly into whatever hangar bay they abject them into. Sakesa entered the allowance then, effective abutting to him as they both faced the anteroom area the boarding access led up to, abaft them. Mission and Zal abrupt into the room, effective out of the way for whatever armament came up the ramp. Bodair came anon after, boring HK abroad from the weapons the adherent was aggravating to arm itself with. Good. No allegation to bang their way out of this aloof yet. He heard hissing as the boarding access was lowered. The bendable bang clacking of boots echoed up the access and into the Capitol hold. A bulk appeared itself. A woman, her red bark was covered in block compatible and mask. Her anatomy swept into the anteroom and about the corner. Through her helmet, her smile showed through. Her aperture opened as she spoke, articulation accordant and blubbery with danger. "My master bids thee welcome." She grinned, bribery with an iconic handle, its protector annular in official inquisitor fashion.